In Chapter 25, we kind of finished the journey of the United States becoming a developed country. A story which obviously it started when the country was first colonized. And it was a huge test for the United States. Just like World War I, the United States was quite reluctant to enter the war. With World War I, the idea was this is a European affair. Let the Europeans figure it out. And it was really quite reluctantly that the United States got involved, and that war, which was called the War to End All Wars, was pretty nasty. I mean, it was pretty hard fought, and it was a war that caused many countries in Europe to fall, and it was a war that started to shift the terrain towards the United States becoming a world power. Now, one of the, in those ensuing years, we then have all the prosperity that comes with the 1920s. We then have essentially a global recession that we have a global recession which hits the United States particularly hard, known as the Great Depression. And then you get the beginning of World War II. Born to a large extent, not out of a single person like a Hitler. Rather, it seems that it's an event. World War II is an event caused by the turmoil caused during the Great Depression and the lack of thought given to how World War I ended. When World War I ended, people really hated the Germans, who were seen as having started the war. And given that they lost the war, everyone then thought, we need to really make the Germans pay for this. Make them pay in gold so much that no one ever wants to fight a war again. So you make it a costly war to have lost. Woodrow Wilson, proposes to create the League of Nations, which was supposed to operate kind of like the United Nations does today, where it was supposed to try to stop wars before they happened on a global basis, try to get some harmony. But the general thought with World War I was, we really stuck it to the Germans who lost. No one's ever going to want to fight a war again. Germany's going to have to pay all these reparations, and we get the League of Nations going. League of Nations ends up not working out. No one subscribes to it, and it has no influence. And Germany, to be able to pay its legally required reparations as part of the settlement of World War I, ends up causing social disorder in Germany. And Germany ends up having to use its precious gold supplies and its resources to make these reparation payments. And it pushes Germany into hyperinflation. And you get these like famous pictures where Germany's got, people are like using currency as their wallpaper, or they're burning the currency. Because Germany, basically, to pay off all these reparations, just starts printing cash. And so the Great Depression in Germany is particularly severe. And the problem with any crisis, like the Great Depression, is that you can do pretty amazing things, and by amazing I mean it could be great or it could be bad. You can do pretty amazing things when people are desperate. Now, if you are a conservative or a Republican, Franklin Roosevelt comes across as a pretty shitty president, right? Because what he represents to those who are conservative and more Republican leaning is he represents a president that creates a more powerful executive, right, presidency. It's a president who carves out a role for the U.S. government in providing assistance, in providing benefits. It carves out a role for the United States government and for the central bank to manipulate the economy. Roosevelt is the one that regulates the banks, regulates the securities market, and takes the U.S. off the gold standard. All things that, if you're a Republican, are abhorrent. Each and every one of them would be bad. And you've got all of them. And you've got the guy running for president, winning re-election 4 times. Winning election, being elected 4 times. I mean, dude, if you're Republican, it's a pretty bad time. And in Germany, you've got all of this economic turmoil. But you also have this, Germany throughout the 1800s and up to World War I was the most industrialized and developed country in the world. Germany, England were the world superpowers, essentially. And World War I wrecked Germany. Germany was no longer respected in the same kind of way. So you've got this loss of respect, you've got this economic turmoil, and along comes Hitler. Right now, this is just my interpretation of the historical events going on. There's going to be other historians that differ in their take on this than what I'm suggesting here. But along comes Hitler, an Austrian, and he basically says, all the things that we are now suffering from as a country is someone else's fault, right? And we can name all the various groups, right? Like gypsies, Jews, Catholics, Freemasons. Those are among the groups that were blamed. And the belief is, we as Germans need to take control of our economy again, take control of our country again, and only then will we become great again. And by the way, the terms that ended World War I have hurt our country very badly. We need to start making our own guns and, warships and tanks and stuff like that. And we're not going to make our payments anymore. And, when you're desperate, you're like, I'm not a Freemason. I'm not Catholic. So, give Hitler a chance. What is there to lose, right? I mean, that's, the general sentiment of the time, at least in Western Europe. And it culminates in 1939 with Germany invading Poland in September of 39. And it was the first domino. And I say that because you have one country invading another country. And the general reaction is, well, he took over Poland. Who gives the fuck? Like, let him take it. Who cares? Like, now he's not going to ask for anything more. Is the general sense. No. On the other side of the world, well, actually, no, before we get to the other side of the world, then you've got in Italy, you've got Benito Mussolini, who's also faces many of the same economic problems in his country. And he's also basically riling the troops up, right? Getting them all to believe in the greatness of Italy. Now, going to the other side of the world, you've got Japan. Japan, an empire that for centuries was isolated from the rest of the world. And then, under President Franklin Pierce in the 1850s, is reawoken to realize that the rest of the world has moved forward. And Japan then realizes that they need to build up their arms. They need to become a stronger country in East Asia. And it culminates with them in the 1930s having taken over much of East Asia, China, Korea, and Japan pushes east. In this time, you've got a large number of Germans in the United States who obviously are not wanting to go to war with Germany for the United States. You got a lot of people who fought in World War I who are still pretty fucked up, who don't want to fight another war. And you've got all these just, you've got an economy that's just hanging by a thread still during the Great Depression. And people are like, dude, just let the Europeans figure it out for themselves. Like, dude, we got other problems, right? Let's just focus on what we need to do. And if the Europeans want to beat each other up, let them do it. In Japan, the relation, so that was the Europeans. In terms of Japan, America didn't really care. The United States didn't really care because Japan wasn't really seen as much of a threat. And then obviously we get Pearl Harbor in 1941, December of 41, which brings the United States into World War II. Thus bringing us to our chapter here. So, what did it all do? What did all of World War II, which was fought over the course of 4 years, 1941 to 1945, for the U.S.'s involvement? Obviously, the entire war goes from 1939 to 1945. The United States loses 405,000 people. Over 5,671,000 are injured. It represents an event where the entire economy transforms itself to a war economy, meaning producing arms, producing tanks, producing, fighter planes, all those things. To do that, it ends the Great Depression because now any of the excess capacity in the economy is all completely eliminated. You then lose the New Deal programs because no longer do you need these temporary economic fixes. It changes Franklin Roosevelt from a person fixing the economy to a person now who has to fight for democracy. And it continues what was started during the Great Depression, which was that the government was going to establish for itself a role in managing the economy. A role that it continues to have to this day. Okay, so let's start with this. So, what we're going to see here in this 4-minute video is Roosevelt's lease lend speech. So, at the time, Congress really did not want the United States to enter the war. Now, there's a realization that the president has as commander, in his role as commander-in-chief, can just send troops to war. But Congress really wanted to avoid that from happening. And to help it avoid it from happening, the Congress said that if anything made in the United States is going to be sold to any other country, they had to pay for it right away in gold, and they had to come pick it up themselves. And the problem comes about is that Britain, the country that's being attacked by Germany with daily bombings, doesn't have the money to pay for stuff anymore. So Roosevelt gives a speech called the Lease and Lend speech that's designed to explain why he'd like to help England. And so that's so then I'll stop talking here, play this, and then talk about it a little bit more.
Let not dictators of Europe or Asia doubt our unanimity now. The process of the elimination of the European nations proceeded according to plan through 1939 and well into 1940 until the schedule was shot to pieces by the unbeatable defenders of Britain. In this historic crisis, Britain is blessed with a brilliant and great leader in Winston Churchill. But knowing him, no one knows better than Mr. Churchill himself that it is not alone his stirring words and valiant deeds that give the British their superb morale. The essence of that morale is in the masses of plain people who are completely clear in their minds about the one essential fact that they would rather die as free men than live as slaves. The British people and their Grecian allies need ships. From America, they will get ships.
So keep in mind there, now Congress is like, dude, we told you can't do it. Why are you giving them ships?
They need planes.
Dude, why are you giving them planes?
From America, they will get planes. Yes, from America they need food. And from America they will get food.
Again, why are we giving them food?
They need tanks and guns and ammunition and supplies of all kinds. From America they will get tanks and guns and ammunition and supplies of all kinds.
Again, why are you doing this, guy?
So our country is going to be what our people have proclaimed it must be, the arsenal of democracy.
Now that's a key line right there. The arsenal of democracy. That is how the United States saw itself before getting involved in actually declaring war. That its role was going to be that it's going to supply the Allies, England, other countries. It's going to supply them with all the stuff they need to do the fighting, but we're not going to do the fighting. We're going to supply them with the stuff they need. And we're going to be that arsenal, meaning supplying all the tools of war. We're going to be that arsenal for democracy.
Our country is going to play its full part. And when, no, I didn't say if, I said when, dictatorships disintegrate, and pray God that'll be sooner than any of us now dare to hope, then our country must continue to play its great part in the period of world reconstruction for the good of humanity.
The spotlight switches, and amid the stirring news of naval...
So, what, the problem was that Congress is going to hears that speech and gets really pissed at Roosevelt and says, dude, we told you can't do it unless you get paid right away and you come and get it yourself. They come and get it themselves. And Britain couldn't do that. Roosevelt's response, which is kind of, just shows how, again, if you're a person who doesn't like this kind of sleight of hand or trickery, this could kind of piss you off, or you could really like the guy for one or the other. But he basically just says, England is just like your neighbor. And let's just say that their house is on fire. You, the neighbor, you'd go out of your house, you'd see their house on fire. The neighbor comes by and says, dude, can I borrow your garden hose to put this fire out? And how Roosevelt describes this to the press is that he says, you wouldn't, as the neighbor, say, well, how much are you going to pay me to rent this hose? Or, I'm sorry, I can't let you have it to fight the fire. You can buy it from me, but I can't just give it to you. Of course you wouldn't do that. You would lend the neighbor the hose. They'd put out the fire, and then the neighbor would give you the hose back after the fire was all put out. And that's essentially what FDR said that we were going to do with England. It's kind of a Christian homily, of doing unto your neighbors as you would do unto yourself. the unfortunate thing, right, in that homily is, dude, you know, the Germans are like blowing the planes up. The food's being eaten. The guns are being shot. So it's not like England's going to be returning anything that America wants back. So you know, it's not really true. Unfortunately, with speeches like that we just saw, it plays up to the fact that, you know, whether you like the guy or hate the guy, you know, people like Trump or whatnot are really good at working the media to push their message. And FDR was as good as anyone in using the media to push his message. Here it just comes across as, dude, give England the ships it needs to fight this war for democracy's sake. And when they're done, they're going to give us the ship back without truly thinking it all the way through and thinking this ship's going to be in pretty sad shape. Now, let's see what England was enduring. So this is a pretty famous description of what London was going through at the time. We might not watch all 8 minutes of this, but it'll give you an idea.
I'm speaking from London. It is late afternoon, and the people of London are preparing for the night. Everyone is anxious to get home before darkness falls, before our nightly visitors arrive. This is the London rush hour. Many of the people at whom you are looking now are members of the greatest civilian army ever to be assembled. These men and women who have worked all day in offices or in markets are now hurrying home to change into the uniform of their particular service. The dusk is deepening. Listening crews are posted all the way from the coast to London to pick up the drone of the German planes. Soon the nightly battle of London will be on. This has been a quiet day for us, but it won't be a quiet night. We haven't had a quiet night now for more than 5 weeks. They'll be over tonight. They'll destroy a few buildings and kill a few people, probably some of the people you are watching now. Now they're going into the public shelters. This is not a pleasant way to spend the night, but the people accept it as their part in the defense of London. These civilians are good soldiers. Now it's 8 o'clock. Jerry is a little bit late tonight. The searchlights are in position. The guns are ready. The People's Army of Volunteers is ready. They are the ones who are really fighting this war. The firemen, the air raid wardens, the ambulance drivers. And there's the wail of the banshee.
And so what we have here is a description that basically during 1940, essentially, you've got Germany every night coming to London, bombing it, and then flying back home at the end of the night, and doing this each and every night in an attempt to have England surrender. And, you know, essentially, Roosevelt, again, doesn't want that to happen. Because if London falls, then the tyranny caused by Hitler is just going to inevitably spread to the United States. So you can at least keep the war out of the United States by making sure that England and London do not fall.
The nightly siege of London has begun. The city is dressed for battle. Here they come. Now the searchlights are poking long, white, inquisitive fingers into the blackness of the night. These are not Hollywood sound effects. This is the music they play every night in London, the Symphony of War. That was a bomb.
And so those people are largely in the subways of London, in the tube.
Deep wisdom given only to the very young and the very old sleep in the shelters. Do you see any signs of fear on these faces? Now the army of the people swings into action. The bombs have started fires. When the bomber starts a fire, he immediately returns, uses it as a target, and drops more bombs, hoping to spread the fire. Yet the people's army ignores the bombs and the spent shrapnel which rains down constantly. Brokers, clerks, peddlers, merchants by day, they are heroes by night. The night is long, but sooner or later the dawn will come. The German bombers are creatures of the night. They melt away before the dawn and scurry back to the safety of their own airdromes. And there's the wail of the banshee again, this time a friendly wail. The all-clear signal tells us that the bombers have gone. It's just 6 a.m. In this last hour of precious sleep, this strange new world finds peace. London raises her head, shakes the debris of
It's sad here.
the night from her hair and takes stock of the damage done. London has been hurt during the night. The sign of a great fighter in the ring is, can he get up from the floor after being knocked down? London does this every morning. London doesn't look down upon the ruins of its houses, upon those made homeless during the night, upon the remains of churches, hospitals, workers' flats. London looks upwards toward the dawn and faces the new day with calmness and confidence. The people's army go to work as they did in that other comfortable world which came to an end when the invader began to attack the last strongholds of freedom. Not all the services run as they did yesterday, but London manages to get to work on time, one way or another. In the center of the city, the shops are open as usual. In fact, many of them are more open than usual.
Ha 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 ha.
Dr. Paul Joseph Gibbles said recently that the nightly air raids have had a terrific effect upon the morale of the people of London. The good doctor is absolutely right. Today the morale of the people is higher than ever before. They are fused together, not by fear, but by a surging spirit of courage the like of which the world has never known. They know that thousands of them will die, but they would rather stand up and face death than kneel down and face the kind of existence the conqueror would impose upon them. And they know, too, and are comforted by the thought that England is not taking its beating lying down. They are guarding the frontiers of freedom. It is hard to see 5 centuries of labor destroyed in 5 seconds. But London is fighting back. I am a neutral reporter. I have watched the people of London live and die ever since death in its most ghastly garb began to come here as a nightly visitor 5 weeks ago. I have watched them stand by their homes. I have seen them made homeless. I have seen them move to new homes. And I can assure you, there is no panic, no fear, no despair in London town. There is nothing but determination, confidence, and high courage among the people of Churchill's Island. And they know that every night the RAF bombers fly deep into the heart of Germany, bombing munition works, airplane factories, canals, cutting the arteries which keep the heart of Germany alive. It is true that the Nazis will be over again tomorrow night, and the night after that, and every night. They will drop thousands of bombs, and they'll destroy hundreds of buildings, and they'll kill thousands of people. But a bomb has its limitations. It can only destroy buildings and kill people. It cannot kill the unconquerable spirit and courage of the people of London. London can take it.
And it largely did. So, fortunately, when this film was made, the idea was that it was shown in the United States in the theaters. Americans realized London's really being hurt here. It doesn't take them too long to figure out if London does fall that America is next. And it starts to push the conversation towards the United States having to get involved in World War II. Again, at this point, Pearl Harbor hasn't happened yet. There's been no direct attack. So, at the time, Germany had invaded Poland, had pushed across the Netherlands, pushed across Belgium, had reached Dunkirk, and in France, was pushing down through France, and now was going to take England, and that's obviously where the push of Germany stopped, was with England. Let's go back to this. Fortunately, there had been a depression in the United States, because what it allowed was the United States to basically now produce all of these war goods without reaching any capacity constraints. So now everyone's employed, everything is happening well. You don't get a lot of inflation because the economy really wasn't being pushed to its limits. And then by the end of 1941, we have Pearl Harbor, which then makes the involvement of the United States in the war pretty much a moot point. What that translated into for the U.S. government involvement in the economy was going even from 8.2% of GDP in 1940 for U.S. government purchases of goods and services to over 50%. Everything is being pushed towards war production. And everything has to be used for that. What we see from the book is we're given a production possibilities frontier, which you may remember from your principles class. And what you see here, even with like 1939, is you see an economy that's producing both civilian goods and military goods. But what's key here is that it's far below capacity, as was true during the Great Depression. The economy could be producing more, but it's just not. And then what you start to see by 1942, when the U.S. is now ramping up to fight the war, is it's pushing the economy closer to the frontier, and it's almost all in the direction of war goods. 1943, now even closer. 1944, at capacity. By 1945, by August of 45, the war is done, at least with Japan. May of 45, the war was done with Germany. And so you do see that scaling back. And then it's completely replaced, reoriented towards consumer goods. That's a dramatic shift. That only comes through the GI Bill, largely, and which is one of the questions on the third exam. Production was the only goal. Not a lot of concern about safety, not a lot of concern about quality. The United States was just big enough to make more stuff than Germany and Japan together. You don't have a lot of examples of infrastructure damage. Really the only examples
Our
we
great
have here,
submarine fleet, operating out of bases in conquered France and Norway, was assigned a major share in sweep.
I think this is sort of propaganda made to seem like it's the Germans making it, but it's not. But U-boats did bomb boats, attack boats off of the East Coast and in the Gulf of Mexico. And that's what we'll see here.
Keeping the Atlantic clear of Allied convoys. At our impregnable bases, the Führer had built up the greatest submarine fleet in history to dominate the Atlantic and end any Allied hopes of decisive help from America.
Again, keep in mind, this is propaganda. By that I mean, this is Americans making themselves seem like Germans to get then the Americans all like upset and be like, those mean Germans, look what they're doing. Just in a war, just like in a divorce, or just like in a breakup of a couple, there are two sides to everything. Not in the sense, I don't mean that in the sense that there wasn't right or wrong in World War II. It's pretty obvious what was right and what was just and what was not. But United States wanted to win just as much as the Axis. Germany, Italy, and Japan wanted to win. And you're going to use propaganda and whatever means necessary to try to win the hearts and minds of others.
Operating in mass echelons, they were to prey on shipping along the coasts of North and South America. And they were to disrupt the ocean supply lines to Britain and Russia, thinly guarded for lack of escort ships.
The goal there was the United States is bringing over all this stuff over to England so that they can now fight the Germans. The Germans are going to want to stop those boats from going across the ocean to Britain, and they're going to attack it with U-boats.
With Hitler's plan already close to succeeding, the United States Navy began improvising defenses. Along the vulnerable North American coast, small craft sufficiently seaworthy to leave harbor were bought or commandeered to form a corsair fleet, whose patrol vessels waged a valiant but almost ineffectual battle against the U-boats. Long neglected lighter-than-air craft were found to be one of the most deadly enemies of the U-boat. Navy blimps, though pitifully inadequate in number, proved themselves invaluable in protecting convoys anywhere within 100 miles of the shore. Operating out of hastily established naval air stations from Newfoundland to Trinidad, the Navy's big patrol bombers added another measure of protection for convoys. Working against great odds, flying and fighting in all weather, learning by experience the secret of coordination with surface craft, the air patrol grew in efficiency. The battle against the U-boats, whose attacks on vital tankers and bauxite carriers had littered American beaches with oil and debris, became more and more evenly fought. Within a few months, the effectiveness of Nazi submarines approaching the North American coast had been greatly reduced by the vigilance of the Navy's flyers. But only on rare occasions were they able to catch a U-boat on the surface and attack it with positive results.
Alle Mann, Tauchstationen! Schneller, schneller, los! Alles bereit? Tauchen!
In case you don't know German, they're basically saying we're essentially going to be attacked. We've been seen, and the guy's saying, "Pay attention. We need to fight." So U-boats and whatnot were fighting, were attacking the U.S. coast, at least initially. And, the United States returned the favor, and they bombed industrial plants in Germany and Japan. I'm not going to play all these videos, but here's another video where they are basically bombing specifically, the United States is bombing specifically industrial plants in Germany and Japan and destroying the infrastructure in an attempt to try to end the war earlier. So like I said, both sides are kind of doing the same thing. One of the things that becomes problematic in World War II, just like in World War I, just like in the Civil War, and even in like the Revolutionary War, is who's going to pay the bills. There's almost never been a war fought in the United States where how to pay for it hasn't been an issue. The lesson learned from the Civil War and even World War I was that the best way to pay for it was with bonds. But the newest weapon in all of this was that the United States was also going to do more taxation. A payroll system, deduction system, was set up in 1943 so that taxes were collected from each paycheck for the very first time, with the result being that over 70%, nearly 80% of all the bills for fighting World War II was paid for with bonds and taxes, and not with currency being issued. President Roosevelt was pretty much opposed to, using bonds to pay for the war because he didn't think that future generations should have to pay for a war being fought by a previous generation. So taxes was a way to make the current generation pay for the current war. But taxes could only cover so much of it. So that then gave us the bonds with all the various bond campaigns that existed. Because new currency was issued, there did have to be some price and wage controls to try to control the increase in prices. And for this, gang, we get a cartoon. Sorry, this one won't be... it's kind of a cartoon, but you'll get more cartoons in a little bit. The point here was that for any food items you needed and whatnot, to control people, you only got a certain number of points, and you had to use points to buy food, so that you wouldn't buy too much, basically. The United States, to sell this to the public, made movies about it, and in this one they used Chuck Jones, who's the cartoonist for like Bugs Bunny and stuff like that.
Wartime America faces the greatest demand for food in our history. Food for our Army and Navy. Food for the invasion front. Food for ourselves on the home front. Food to help our fighting allies and the people of the Allied countries. It takes pounds of food a day to keep a soldier on the fighting front. Millions of pounds of food each day. The best way to supply our men overseas and our fighting allies with most of the foods they need is in dried form and in cans. In addition to the military, other factors affect our canned food supply. Take tin, for example. Our major peacetime sources have been cut off by the enemy. Our railroads and other transportation facilities are being taxed to their utmost, carrying munitions, armaments, war supplies, and troops. That leaves less shipping space for civilian foodstuffs. And then there's the farm labor shortage. All this means that we at home will have less canned fruits, vegetables, soups, and other processed foods for our use. Without rationing of these foods, some people would get more than their fair share. Others would not even get what they need. But rationing assures everyone of his fair share. That is why your government is rationing canned fruits and vegetables and other processed foods. Until now, we have been rationing one item at a time, like sugar and coffee. But processed fruits and vegetables are not one product. They are hundreds of products in hundreds of different brands, grades, sizes, varieties. In cans, bottles, packages, in dried and frozen form. One cannot say, as in the case of sugar, each citizen will be allowed 2 cans of peaches a week or 4 cans of spinach.
Spinach, take the
That
spinach.
some people don't like spinach. Some of you may want to buy canned corn.
Sure.
Others of you may want to buy canned peas or spinach. So the question arises, what method of rationing can be used so that each citizen may get his fair share of canned fruits and vegetables and other commercially packed foods, and that will still allow freedom of choice?
Points.
The system which has been adopted and has worked successfully in England for over a year is called point rationing. In the point rationing system, all these foods are grouped together, and your ration book is used to buy those you like. Those items which are not so scarce will take fewer points. Items which are more scarce will take more points. Point stamps to buy these ration goods are in War Ration Book 2. This book contains blue and red stamps. Blue stamps are to be used for canned fruits, vegetables, soups, juices, and other processed foods. Red stamps will be used for meat. This is a typical page of blue stamps in War Ration Book 2. Notice that the stamps are given point numbers, 8, 5, 2, 1. Everyone will get 48 points each period. That means you will use blue stamps ABC for the first period, DEF for the second, and so forth. Point values will be the same in all stores. Every store in which you shop must post the official table of point values of all point rationed items in all sizes. From time to time, point values may change, and stores will post the new point values. Here's an example of how point rationing works. This lady, all decked out with her family's brand new ration books, starts out to do some shopping. First of all, she wants to buy a can of peas. She wants to buy a can of chicken soup. And she wants some dried prunes.
No, I guess no one wants prunes.
Well, there's our list complete, and all that remains to be done is to tear out 14 points in stamps and pay the grocer. But wait just a minute. Just for fun, let's take another look at that point ration table. Hey, slow down there. What about those string beans? Why, they're only 3 points in the size we want. If we buy those instead of peas, we can save 5 points. And what's this? Fresh apples don't require any points. Well, why not buy those instead of dried prunes?
Yeah, dude.
And save another point. So there we are, our shopping list complete. With the same amount of goods, and with 6 points saved for future use. Smart girl. She's smart in more ways than one, too. Because she used her large stamps first, wisely saving her small ones for low-point purchases later on. Because she shops early in the day, and so helps her grocer. Because wherever possible, she substitutes unrationed fresh fruits and vegetables for canned or processed ones. This is point rationing. This is the way to assure everyone here at home an equal opportunity to get the same fair share. This is the way to assure food for our fighting men and for our fighting allies. Share and share alike is the American way to victory.
Okay, so basically that's how things are then rationed out, was with points, spreading it out. Now, the problem is anytime you do some rationing, especially with points, is you're going to have a black market. And you're going to have counterfeiting of the stamps as well, both of which were pretty prominent problems. We'll skip this here.
For $18.75, an American could buy a $25 government bond, save for the future.
So part of this, as we go through this here, what we're showing here is the advertisements are used to, one, take money out of the economy to have people stop spending it by making them buy bonds, but then again controlling their consumption through rations.
Defend the country against inflation and help win the war. Quite a bargain.
The tall man with the high hat will be coming down your way. Get your savings out when you hear him shout, any bonds today? Come on and get 'em, folks. Come on, step right up and get 'em. Any bonds today? Bonds of freedom, that's what I'm selling. Any bonds today?
Hollywood's most famous movie stars leave the film capital to help the government sell war bonds. Irene Dunn, Ronald Colman, Hedy Lamarr, Greer Garson, all part of a contingent of some 50 screen celebrities giving their time and talents to aid the national war effort. The country has asked the people to invest $1 billion in 1 month to help pay for the war. And here's the start of the drive. Boarding a special train for Washington, they'll tour 300 cities from coast to coast. Go to any city that agrees to subscribe at least $1 million. The parade down Pennsylvania Avenue is a pageant of paper.
Yeah, good thing they could use the Transcontinental Railroad, which is what they were using there. They were taking the Southwest Chief Railroad from L.A. east along the Transcontinental Railroad.
Patriotism. Bing Crosby in a scout car. Jimmy Cagney. Abbott and Costello, popular comedians of stage, screen, and radio. They all assemble on the Treasury steps to launch the drive for funds. And how that crowd lines up to buy bonds from their favorites. They buy knowing that every dollar invested helps send more planes, tanks, and ships to the United Nations. This is the people's way of saying, from the home front to the battlefront, from movie stars to sales clerks, America's 130 million citizens are in the war.
Here comes the freedom man.
You can't make tomorrow's plan.
Not unless you buy a share of freedom today. Any stamps, any bonds today.
One way or another, almost every American became involved in the war effort, even the children. It was part of growing up in the 40s.
Let's put the axe to the axis. Let them know that their show is all through. Oh, let's put the axe to the axis. Lend a hand to the land we'll approve. With all our might, we'll fight, because we know we're right. And then, again, the future will be bright. So let's put the axe to the axis and finish up the trouble they began.
We get the idea here. Obviously, things like this right here, obviously that German is being mischaracterized as both rats and, this mean-looking guy. And then you've got the German here, and then you've obviously got the racism involved, in the portrayal of the Japanese as well. So, yeah, I mean, no one is trying to be culturally appropriate here in these advertisements. Well, that's because it's war. I'm not sure it's not necessarily right or what should be done, but it's what was done. Now, the war was kind of put on hold all of the additional support that FDR had given to the labor unions to win the war, to fight the war and to win the war, to supply all the arms that were needed. Unions pledged to not strike. Companies agreed not to lock workers out. And so basically, everyone went to their corner and basically said, don't worry, we're not going to cause any problems. After the war ends, organized labor, the unions wanted higher wages, which they didn't get. Interestingly enough, what they were given, what union workers were given, was health care. For the very first time in the United States, the employer was then offering health care as a way to avoid having to give higher wages. Thus, gave birth to the uniquely American system of health care where it's tied to the employer. What happened in 1947 was the Taft-Hartley Act, which effectively weakened the unions by giving workers a right not to join the union, and it allowed for a greater ability to lock out striking workers. We also have, in terms of labor relations, we have lots of examples of women and minorities becoming more involved in the labor force to produce stuff. And there's lots of examples of that in media. So World War II gets fought. I'm not a military history expert, so you can watch all the movies out there about, all the different battles and whatnot. This is not my thing. But what we get out of after the war is the war ends, and then everyone starts coming back. And then the concern is the Great Depression going to come back? So you have the U.S. government saying, okay, let's try to make sure that let's make sure that the economy doesn't go back to having a Great Depression. Let's say that the central bank and the federal government needs to ensure that there's maximum employment, production, purchasing power. But also you get the GI Bill. And the GI Bill is designed to help move the economy to a consumer economy. Let's see this basic explanation here.
This summer, escape to Great Wolf Lodge, your drive-to destination for
Great Wolf
family
Lodge?
fun. Sure, there are water slides, games, and plenty of adventure.
It's on the mainland.
The GI Bill of Rights.
Just who gets the benefits of this bill?
Any veteran, male or female, with more than 3 months active service, who hasn't been dishonorably discharged.
Will it help me in finding a job?
No, the bill itself does not. But you do get help elsewhere. It's your draft board that helps you to get your old job back. Or the United States Employment Service will help you find a new one.
But suppose they don't find me a job right away.
If they can't find you a job right away, you'll be given $20 a week up to a limit of 52 weeks. Moreover, if your job brings in less than $23 a week, you get a government check to make up the difference between your income and $23.
What's the dope on borrowing money?
Don't get the wrong idea about that loan provision. The government doesn't guarantee that you will get a loan. It just makes it a little easier for you to borrow money for a business, equipment, a farm, a home.
Yeah, now suppose I want to borrow enough to build myself a house.
Making arrangements for this loan will still be your job. As with any loan, before you can borrow, you have to show you have credit. By credit, we mean property you own, or the money you're earning, or the skill and experience behind you. Normally, you would have to back all of this loan yourself. But when you're a veteran, the government will back 50% of your loan, up to a limit of $2,000. In addition, the government pays the interest for 1 year on this part of the loan.
Does the GI Bill of Rights give us any free education?
Every veteran, young or old, can study in any approved school for 1 year. Grammar school or high school, college, trade school, business school. You name it, and if you can meet the requirements, you can have it. The government pays all of your school bills up to $500 a year, and living expenses of $50 a month, or $75 a month if you have dependents. Moreover, if you were under 25 when you went into the service, or at 25 or over, and can show that the war interrupted your education, when you come back, you can have that 1 year that every veteran gets, plus the same length of time you spent in active service. That is up to a total of 4 years of schooling. Those are the main points of your GI Bill of Rights. Help if you're unemployed, help in borrowing money, free education. It's not a bonus. It's not a handout. But it is a way to help you get started again in your permanent career as a United States citizen.
when you partner with UWM as a broker.
So, now, you should keep in mind, not everyone gets to enjoy these GI Bill benefits equally. You can click on this video if you want to. This is just something I found.
The ratification of the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, commonly known as the
where it basically just says, you know, just because this war was fought, there's still segregation. So obviously non-white soldiers didn't get to enjoy all of the benefits of the GI Bill that white soldiers returning got. It's not that surprising. You know, just because a war was fought with people being mean to each other doesn't mean that Americans all of a sudden realize, dude, we're also mean to people. I don't think that lesson was necessarily learned. And what you get with the GI Bill is it is relatively successful. As we saw here, the GI Bill combined with other things really did move the economy, reorient it from military production to consumption. Okay, that's it for our World War II chapter.